You're online, please start.
Hello, everybody. So we welcome you to our Startup Leaders Club online panel discussion by inspirational leaders of innovation and drivers of change. And today we discuss impact of COVID-19 on global tech, Series 8, disrupting industries, creating new business models, and finding new opportunities in crisis. And I will briefly introduce myself. My name is Nadia Nesterova. I'm independent director of the board of the National Alternative Investment Management Association and advisor to a number of leading GPs in private equity, venture capital, private equity, real estate, and hedge funds. My co-moderator today is Gianpaolo Parigi, venture capital and chairman of Single Family Office. And our honorable speaker today is Stanton Monlux, operating partner of Ramp Catalyst, João Duarte, venture partner of Lighthouse Ventures, Kurt Collins, founding builder of Shibbank, Ira Krzyzewska, growth hacker at BP Launchpad, Lin Wills, managing partner of POP agency, advisor to Lowell VC, Dan Turchin, a CEO of People Rhine, and Anthony Falma, a principal at Griffin Gaming Partners. And I will give a word to each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their companies. Lillian, could you please start?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my name is Lillian Wills. I'm managing partner of Pop Agency. Pop Agency is a brand setting agency that we coach startups managing the interplay of storytelling and story making to grow customer base and land funding. My personal experience, I have been working as in marketing agency and also head of marketing for many startup companies as well as brand companies, media company like ESPN Start and MTV Asia. So most of currently I'm as a advisor for loyal VCs, advising startup on their brand setting and coaching startup for growth.
Thank you so much, Lillian. And Ira, could you also introduce yourself and the company?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ira. Currently, I work for BP Launchpad, which is BP Business Builder. And I would like to mention that I'm also working for VIII, which is a mobile application that is focused on mobility. And VIII is one of the residents at BP Launchpad. I currently take care of the growth for VIII and the growth for some of the residents of Launchpad. And my experience is, I would say, starting from performance marketing and then building everything into growth, either it's organic or paid for the mobile applications. And before coming into BP Launchpad and VIII, I was working for a family of dating apps, Magic Club, which is working with apps like Badoo and Bumble. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dan, could you also introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain. PeopleRain is an AI platform for employee HR and IT service. We automate the process of helping employees at large enterprises get better service faster via automation. And large organizations around the world, like McDonald's, for example, uses PeopleRain in 40,000 restaurants to support 2 million employees. Adidas, large banks and insurance companies. And I think more germane to today's conversation, we're proud of the work that we're doing to help our customers transition back to work and think through the implications of new data collection and the increased support volume placed on service providers, internal service providers like HR and IT. So happy to be here and I look forward to hearing from the panelists.
Thank you. And Kurt?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name is Kurt Collins. I'm the founding builder of Shibbank, which is an organization that works with nonprofits and international NGOs to help them manage and track their impact. We are working on building an established network of truly impact-driven nonprofits. I've been in the tech industry now for nearly more than 20 years on both the software engineering side and on the business development side. And I often work with minorities and women entrepreneurs throughout the industry.
Thank you. And Joe?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm a venture partner with Lighthouse Ventures. Lighthouse is a VC fund based in Prague, in Czech Republic. We invest in startups with technology background and international potential, based here in Czech Republic or nearby. Before that, I was a founder of techloop.io, which is a kind of Central European version of hire.com, a platform for hiring IT professionals. So I've seen it from both sides, from the founder and now from the investor, and I basically work with startups and help them in their growth journey. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stan?
Hi, I'm Stan Monlex, operating partner at Ramp Catalyst. We're an investment advisory fund that's working with emerging tech and med tech investments. We focus really on corporate spinouts and industry roll-ups, really helping them towards accelerated exits. My background, I've been in tech startups since I was in college, and you can see the gray hair. So I've held executive roles in operations, product, sales, marketing, and business development. So the whole kind of go-to market part is the part that I've been called on to do a lot of work with. Co-founded, I think it's 5 different startups, but had my hands in a lot of others. So it'll be interesting to talk about the different marketplaces and the different roles of, investment in tech today.
Thank you, Stan. And Anthony?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Palma. I'm the principal at Griffin Gaming Partners, which is a relatively new fund singularly focused on the gaming industry with investments in kind of Series A and growth stage funding. My background is also an operator and founder. I've been in the gaming industry my entire career and founded a game development studio, then ran an accelerator for game developers, and most recently ran a cloud gaming startup for the last few years. So probably the newest VC on the panel. I've been doing this for all of 2.5 months, but it's been exciting to see both sides of the table, and it's been interesting to see what's going on in this environment with gaming in particular.
Thank you, Anthony. So we have a number of serial entrepreneurs from different parts of the world. Some of them are also investors and currently investing into different strategies. And I will also introduce you Gianpaolo Parigi, my co-moderator today, who is also representing investors on our today's panel.
Yes, hello everyone. Gianpaolo Parigi here, venture capitalist, private equity player, entrepreneur, former investment banker of 30 years. In international business and deal making in 5 continents, investing in technology, bricks and mortar, and advising institutional technology companies and manufacturing companies around the world. Happy to have you all here. If I may start around the questions, I would like to start from something that I think our audience might be quite intrigued by. And Kurt, the question would be for you, because I think you are the leading expert on the panel regarding nonprofit organizations. What do you see, how do you see the nonprofit organization having morphed through the COVID? Do you think that they are doing better homeworks now? They are reaping any rewards from the transformation that we're all living through? What's your take on where they are at the moment?
Thanks for the question. So that's an interesting one. The nonprofit industry mirrors the for-profit industry in a lot of ways, in that there are some sectors of it that are doing extremely well right now. For instance, there are a couple of nonprofits that we work with that are in the educational technology space. And some of them are seeing anywhere from 10 times the traffic that they saw a year ago at this time to as much as 100 times the traffic that they saw a year ago this time. So, so there's definitely some mirroring going on there. But there are also a number of nonprofits that have seen their funding dry up, and a lot of that is because they are receiving 80–90% of their revenue is coming from donations. And since nobody's working at the moment, people are concerned about where their next meal is going to come from, as opposed to giving as much in donations as they used to. I think what's going to be interesting coming out of this for the nonprofit and NGO sector is to see how many of them start to develop business plans that are independent of the traditional donation-based revenue. I foresee that some of them are going to have to start providing paid-for services post-COVID, so as to mitigate any future disaster on the revenue front, because this has been, I think, a wake-up call for a number of them. And I really do believe, or I hope rather, not believe, I hope that nonprofits will start to realize that the services they provide are truly valuable and can thus be paid for. So we'll see.
Oh, thank you very much. And Lilian, from the communication standpoint of view, I mean, how do you see the communication changing through these quite turbulent times?
Yeah, so we have been like really surprised about this process. It was like a storm blew through, and so we thought, I mean, like the profession of marketing communication to be considered a luxury item for lots of company, but it turned out that actually communication is like air. It's so it lead to sales, so it's like a most like pivoting the messaging. So we're being quite busy like helping company. They need to pivoting and redo the mission and vision for the future. So all the process like re-strategizing what to communicate, like what happened in the current environment. So retweaking the messaging. So that has been quite interesting that it ended up not being a luxury. It's become a very essential service per se.
Zhao, would you comment on your current investment strategy? Do you have any observations on your current portfolio and maybe something in the segments you are looking for with regard to the impact of COVID-19? And were there any changes in your strategies due to that?
Yeah, so we mostly focus on B2B projects, back with some technology that is difficult to replicate and that has some international potential. In terms of looking at our portfolio, we didn't have any investments in the sectors that got most affected, like events or travel. So we were lucky there. At the same time, we saw the sales cycles getting longer. Mostly in most of the cases, meetings getting canceled or taking longer. So all the startups across the portfolio experienced that a bit. Since we're based in Czech Republic and it's already lockdown is starting to end, we're not experiencing that so much anymore. Moving forward, sectors that we find interesting, things around the future of work, remote work, remote collaboration. We see a lot of potential in those areas. And we also see more applications or innovations around biology, biotech, and even using of machine learning and AI to create innovations in terms of biotech and medicine. So that's what I would say in general, what we can take from it so far.
Thank you. And Stan, what about your area of interest? Did it change, or did you experience any of the pivots in your strategies as well?
Well, I can say probably from deal flow, nothing's really changed yet because it's still too early in the cycle. But I do know that, we're really set up to be opportunistic, and that we work a lot with larger companies that might be divesting of projects that they've been incubating in-house for some time. And so it's been a very interesting time to be talking with some of these larger corporations that had projects and really interesting things that they were working on with a team of people, but now think, we've got to focus and we've got to keep our team lean. And so maybe now is a good time for that project to live outside the house. And it's interesting the way a lot of larger tech companies work. They recognize that innovation isn't always best in-house. Sometimes it's really good to let it happen outside and then acquire it at the right times. But sometimes the opposite is true. They know that they aren't the best host for emerging tech in some occasions. And when it's not really mission critical, it's best to go outside and get outside investors. So now's a really good opportunity for us. We've been fielding some really interesting calls from some large, players here in the Seattle market. And so that, to us, it's been a very opportunistic time. The other part of the shop that we do is these roll-ups where we're consolidate smaller tech companies so that they can be more efficient in attacking the market in their segment. And for kind of the mid-market startups, these guys typically would be going after their Series B. Now's not a good time for that. Pulling a few of those together so that they're a bigger player, more stable within their marketplace. These are things that they're very opportunistic, and so it's worked out. We're getting a lot of deal flow now. Where the investment part of that happens, that's a different story because we always co-invest. So it'll be interesting to see how it really plays out.
Thank you so much. And Anthony, would you also comment? Was there any influence of COVID-19 on the industries on your part?
Yeah, for gaming, I think we're all pretty aware that the levels of usage and kind of revenue that we're seeing are historic in gaming right now because people locked up don't really have much else to do. So it's been interesting for us from a few different perspectives. The one shift that we've moved away from is obviously anything pertaining to live events. So, a lot of esports investments have kind of been tabled, and we've seen a lot of strategy shifting into digital esports events over the last month or so. But largely for us, kind of as Stan said, it's been business as usual on the investment front. We're continuing to get the normal amount of deal flow. And the biggest challenge for us moving forward is going to be sorting out who saw organic growth from COVID in the gaming industry that will last versus who had something that was interesting while people were locked down, but won't be as interesting once they can go back outside freely. So it's a good time for gaming startups just because they're going to see a lot more organic growth than they would have ever seen otherwise. But obviously it's about making that work kind of in the post-lockdown world. So we're going to be tracking that very closely.
Thank you, Anthony. And Ira, how do we go about hacking growth in this period?
Well, I would focus here on VIII and how we are working there right now, because for us, it's a very challenging time. VIII is as a mobility/travel app, and we heavily depend on people doing either their daily commutes to and from work or school or traveling because they need to add their trips. And the goal for us right now is to do particular product changes that will help us still develop the user base and also change the messaging. For example, before we were focusing on, let's say, your international travels. Now we're thinking about perhaps delivery because people now have a lot of deliveries coming into their place. Either it's a food delivery or online shopping or anything else. And perhaps we are thinking they would be able to actually offset their deliveries because this is still mobility, either not there, but the companies they are ordering it from. Or what we have in terms of the messaging, we are trying to educate now people in terms of carbon footprint, climate change, and how it's influenced by COVID-19, and what people can still do while they're at home. And what they can do right now is actually calculate their carbon footprint that they have saved rather than they have generated by traveling. So it's more about finding these hacks in terms of what to tell to the audience and get their feedback on this.
Thank you, Ira.
And Dan, would you also share with us how do you feel the impact in your segment?
Yeah, so AI-driven automation is impacting the world of the large enterprise. Call it in kind of three vectors. So one, it's changing how managers support their internal teams. Two, it's changing how service providers support their global bases of employees. And then three, it's forcing large enterprises to rethink their go-to-market, their business model. And I kind of share how the pandemic has affected our business and our customers' businesses in all three of those. So in terms of management, so AI-driven automation is very helpful to understand the impact of quarantine on team members' mental health. So when it comes to your check-ins, it's nice to have a stream of data where AI is being used to do things like recommend how to structure a one-on-one or provide guidance about which of your employees may be at risk of burnout, things like that. So it's leading to new sets of questions to help manage teams better. Number two, kind of the second, call it vector, how HR, IT, facilities, finance, internal service providers at large enterprises think about the needs of their global employee bases. And so they're looking at things like, how can we address the common requests, password resets, and questions about the reopening policy for an office, or am I going to need to have my temperature checked? There's a massive spike in routine issues, and the issues are new. So this is an opportunity for artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand, kind of take the global temperature, so to speak, of the employee base and provide automation scripts that eliminate the additional burden on internal service providers. Now, third example, kind of a third vector, is how our customers are taking advantage of, taking advantage is the wrong word, but giving back to their communities to better support the ways to address the pandemic. And one example of that really inspired my team is how one of our customers in the UK, it's a large managed service provider for IT services, using PeopleRain, they were actually able to automate the amount of work that 6 full-time equivalent FTEs, live agents were doing. And they're now supporting an effort, this is in the UK, where they're manufacturing and distributing PPE, personal protective equipment, to NHS hospitals. And so this was 6 full-time call center agents that before the PeopleRain application were needed to support their customers full-time in a call center. But thanks to AI-driven automation, they're able to transition them to support the work that the NHS is doing. So kind of 3 vectors, so managing teams, managing global employee bases, but also thinking about how AI can free up resources to better support the global mission to flatten the curve. So all ways that I'm proud of the work that our team is doing, and it's certainly been a dramatic shift over the last 4 or 5 months.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stan, I have a question for you. And this is also, you mentioned that you were working on roll-ups on pre-Series B
Yes.
type of companies. I am doing that with my group at the basement level. I think you're on the first floor. We're working on pre-Series A and roll-ups, and I'm quite curious to compare notes and see a little bit more in details. I mean, what do you see in that space? It's quite, I think, interesting also for our listeners and the panel.
Well, there's one project that comes to mind it's I2H, which is Interactive Insight Holdings, and that project is really focused on the analytics and the data sciences that go behind the prescriptive and predictive analytics that is applied to loyalty programs. And so there's a whole kind of ecosystem of businesses in the MarTech space that are really focused on providing repeat business and focusing the initial message so it's much more personalized. But using data to do this, even the very best companies, some of our customers there include companies like Starbucks and Microsoft. companies that you would think of as the gold standard in personalization still are innovating, and they are really dependent on people that have deep knowledge on how this works. And so what we've done is we're looking at a whole kind of I think 5 different businesses right now that we're all calling into the same customers, that we're all kind of essentially selling as part of a solution to that customer. So integrating these businesses together and selling them as a single solution kind of made sense from a marketing standpoint. But there's this old adage when it comes to tech companies, and that it's a lot easier to sell a company for $50 million than it is to sell it for 5. So to kind of get a justification for a $50 million valuation, putting 4 companies that each had a valuation of 10 million together, right, and become a company that has a valuation of 40 million, it becomes more interesting. And so this is a strategy we've employed before, and we think it's something that really works well. The marketing technology space right now, it has its challenges. I mean, ad spends are down across the board. A few of these companies were looking great 6 months ago because they had a lot of revenue coming in through hospitality accounts, and they've had to shift and find that money from other accounts. So it's stressful. Nothing's over until it's over. But that process, we think, just the strategy of these smaller businesses coming together to be more efficient going after a market really plays well for everybody concerned with it, because we can accelerate and exit better.
Thank you. I am of the same opinion, absolutely. I think critical mass is crucial, and not only in periods of crisis, but also in the new horizon in the 21st century. Lillian, which is the no communication thing in this moment? Which is something that you would recommend companies should not communicate now?
Should not communicate as a business as the same. I think this is the new setting. In order to engage anyone's attention, it should not communicate like we are doing business as usual. But to as a, like, always have to say what is happening, and then why your business matter at this moment of time. If people already people just kind of turn off or will not listen if you say we continue doing business the same way we did before.
Thank you. Please, you want to add something? Lillian, do you want to add something? You were saying something.
Yeah, I think that's. But I would say what should be saying versus what should not be saying. What should be saying, it's completely kind of getting back. Like I have a friend who is a florist, and then her business completely kind of now in the standstill, shut down. But like one day I was kind of talking to her and said maybe you can change your messaging, like say now is the flower is the best time to touch someone, and that kind of make people think in a different way about sending flower, not just like fluffy, non-essential stuff, but at this moment that you really need more is to touch someone. That flower is the means to touch someone.
Thank you. Kurt, coming back to the consolidation play that Stan and I were mentioning, do you see that happening really sometime or anytime soon in the nonprofit world?
Let's just say I have hopes and dreams of that, but no. I don't, and primarily because I'm not convinced that the nonprofit space has the capital for it. It with the understanding that there are very large nonprofits out there, the United Way and the Gates Foundation, and there are large funds out there that manage to pull off um, interesting investment strategies. Um, but from the perspective of mergers or roll-ups, like you guys were talking about, I think before that happens, the nonprofits and NGOs need to determine their true economic value. Not only economic, but their true economic and impact-based value, right? And that's something that is notoriously difficult for them to determine, especially when you're comparing not only across industries but across sectors within the nonprofit space. So how do you whereas in the for-profit space you can look very easily at revenue in order to determine valuation of organizations. Determining a valuation of a nonprofit or an NGO would have to, in large part, be based on impact. And doing a comparison across different segments of the nonprofit space based on impact, it's not impossible by any means. It's just a lot more difficult given the current state of that space. So, with that said, pulling off a series of roll-ups, you can definitely do it. But I don't see it as a thing that would start happening a lot in the nonprofit space in the immediate future before we figure out a few things on the metric side.
Very, very interesting, the angle. Thank you so much for that contribution. John, you wanted to add? So you were maybe raising your hand, or am I mistaken? Okay, Nadia, please.
Yes, Zhao, would you please comment what is the most important of your investment criteria right now, taking into account the COVID-19 situation for your portfolio companies?
It's about investing in companies that will be valuable in the next cycle. So some companies with some deep tech innovation, they will always be valuable. It's difficult to replicate, whether now during COVID, whether if we have a recession that lasts a couple of years, because of that intrinsic value. So that's what we look for the most. Really deep tech innovation that is difficult to replicate and that will subsist through the next cycle, no matter how hard it gets now in the beginning.
What about you, Stan?
So the question was how the COVID situation is changing.
Do you have any change in your investment criteria for the projects, or what is the most important in terms of your selecting projects?
Yeah, there hasn't been any change. I think, and the fundamentals, if anything, kind of get highlighted. That the most critical part in any startup, when we look at somebody that's kind of launching, is one of the questions we ask ourselves is how really intimate are they with their customer? How well do they know that customer need? And do they, if they really, really understand their customers, then they're in a good position. If they're, in a lot of cases, you have, ideas that get incubated within an N of one, right? Somebody was working with a hotel and said, hotel should do something different. And they start their company based on their experience with their hotel, only to find out that when they go to market, not every hotel operates the way theirs did, right? And so when we look at this understanding of the market and how they're impacting status quo and how what their capacity is to alter status quo, those are fundamental, and those will always be true. one of the things we see right now is status quo is changing a little bit, right? So that when you look at in the medical space, telehealth, it was very difficult to get adoption in telehealth, especially in the US markets. It's not so much anymore, right? Now they're looking at barriers to break down to make that part of the operating norm. So the status quo changes. And that's, I think, one of the challenges. But what we look for in a company doesn't really change. We're looking at their capacity to understand their customer extremely well. And that's the thing when we go into diligence, we hit that harder than we hit tech, right? We really, their capacity to really know why their products and solutions make a difference is the most challenging thing for a start to have. That hasn't changed.
Thank you. And Anthony, what about your segment?
I think it's very similar to what Stan shared, and even from the consumer perspective, is understanding that customer is paramount anymore. And I think one sector that we find particularly interesting now is something that may have been emerging before this all happened, that's now seeing kind of the value of what that can bring moving forward. So, for example, virtual concerts. We've seen a lot in Fortnite with Travis Scott and Marshmello pulling in 12 million people to watch a concert inside of a video game, and that may have seemed kind of nutty a year ago, but they started to pull these types of events together prior to COVID lockdown, and now we're invested into a company that's doing something similar as a platform. And so being on the emerging side of what's happening on technology is interesting, that particularly when you look at it through the lens of how are people's behaviors going to be changing after this, and what will they be a little more open to than they may not have recently, as far as attending experiences or things like that. On the content side of gaming, there's not a whole lot of change, just because content continues to innovate, and I think we're going to see a new wave of innovation with cloud-based content generation, AI content generation. And a lot of really interesting things happening on that front, as content normally does. But it all kind of comes back to what Stan had said of, on the content side in particular, it's really about understanding the customer and how deeply intimate are they with the users that are on their platform, and how are they able to retain and engage them. And I think one of the things that'll come out of this long term is how are they able to retain people as they're moving back into their a little bit more normalcy in their lives.
Thank you. Gianpaolo, do you have some questions?
Yeah, just coming back to Anthony for a double dip. Do you see then a certain bias that exists in some of the investors on the gaming industry having been diminished or changed as a result of the new normal, more people, of course, having to spend time confined? I begin to notice that there's let's say a change for the better. What do you say, as you're in the industry?
Yeah, I think folks that haven't really looked at gaming seriously in the past have started to look at it more seriously, excuse me, over the last couple of years, just because the growth has continued to be pretty strong. And now they're really taking a look, as it's one of the few industries that would survive not only a recession, but also a complete lockdown. So we're definitely seeing a lot of positive trends externally, and folks getting more involved in the gaming industry and be a bigger part of potential investments that we're looking at. I think within the gaming industry, we're starting to see some bias against things like live events, as well as ad tech, as Stan had mentioned earlier as well. It's going to be a tough business to scale right now until things change around. And so the businesses that will be interested in those sectors are the ones that are really set for recovering once this is all over, and understanding what their long-term plan is beyond what the current numbers are today, because we know that the numbers today are a little out of the ordinary, I think we could say.
Thank you.
Lillian, question to you. During this pandemic, what do you think is important for companies to succeed and survive in the current environment in terms of their story and their interaction with their clients? Maybe in terms of crisis communications.
Right. Yeah. In terms of crisis communication, it's like reframing the crisis instead of make it become debilitating as a making it as an opportunity. So and redoing the mission. So I think the crisis it's when we always think crisis is opportunity. So like it's an opportunity for people to rebuild and re-strategize and repair their business. And so there are way cutting costs, and then there are ways revisioning, like drawing your journey line. So all this this is in terms of communication. Could you rephrase your question again? I kind of lost the first part.
What do you think is important in terms of crisis communications for companies, not only to sustain in the current environment, but to succeed as well?
Right. I think that for a company, they have to engage all their teams, employee together to revision their business and then make their owning their mission. Like they need to redo their mission, and so one of them is yeah. So the I think all of them is thinking of in a level of first level is the survival, like sales, marketing, and then second level is operational efficiency. So they kind of come up, and then third level is like innovate and revamp their future. So I think these are 3 steps are important for business.
Thank you, Lilian. Yeah.
And, Kurt has a question, I guess, for all of us. Kurt, floor is yours.
Actually, this one was based off of the gaming conversation, that the gaming track that we went off on for 1 second there. Do you guys feel as if, and this, do you feel as if the esports platform in general may have a role to play in a post-COVID world? I'm only intrigued because some of the companies that we work with in the nonprofit space are actually edtech and gaming-based companies. So I'm trying to understand what we might be able to do to innovate in that arena.
Yeah, I think it's going to come back in the physical form, just as sports come back. It'll be cautiously at first and eventually back to full bore. But on the digital side, I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in being able to host virtual tournaments. We're already seeing a lot of deals kind of in that space, as well as training for esports. So while you're locked up, why not become an expert at one particular game or the other? And a lot of that is AI driven, a lot of that's data driven, which has become really interesting as some of the larger games provide API access to their backend, so you can actually understand that you are improving. Just like running a 40 time over and over again until you get faster and faster. I think it's also a really important part of our ability to communicate right now. So, for example, I play Call of Duty Warzone with one of my partners and our associate pretty much every night, and that's the way that we hang out right now because we can't really see each other in person, or anyone else for that matter. We've also visited each other on our Animal Crossing islands and shown off what we built. So, I think not only is it important for being able to get some normalcy back in the esports world, but esports in general are largely very communicative as it is, and so it plays a secondary role in helping us stay connected in the world right now. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on that now and multiplayer type experiences, and there's going to be a lot of emphasis moving forward.
I think Kurt Anthony is the most qualified to answer the question, so I think we leave it we'll leave it with his answer to this. I have a question for John. John, could you guide us a little bit as to what you see happening in the eastern part of the European Union, since as you are in a vantage point in Prague? What do you see in the technology space happening over there?
So this area is very strong in terms of university, and developers. So you see good B2B innovation coming from this area, good software solutions, engineering, also some medical stuff recently. It's definitely not that strong in terms of B2C. But maybe something I wanted to add that I noticed here related with the COVID crisis, it's kind of ending now, right? So life is getting back to normal. And when we think about what's gonna stick, what's gonna be big I would like to separate into two parts. When we have the short term and the other, the long term. And in the short term, the COVID-19 crisis caused a lot of people to try certain things for the first time. So try esports, try online gaming for the first time, try food delivery, try even online shopping. So this, I was talking to a friend who works in one of these companies, and he was saying, you don't know how expensive it is normally to acquire certain type of customers. He said, for example, imagine older than 40, family guy, he would never order the groceries himself. He would never play online gaming. And now he tried it. So you had customers that were very expensive to acquire before, and they all tried it now. And many of them will stick. So it's a pivotal moment for some of these industries where people were able to try it for the first time. They might enjoy it, they might stick with it. And I would say this is short term. And then the effect that this will have mid to long term is that some other technologies that were perhaps not taking off, this might be also the moment for them. And I would dare to say that VR, AR, and mixed reality and all that will be exploding 2 or 3 years from now. Based on the growth that you now have. We are all here doing calls every day on video and video conferences, and AR, mixed reality, VR is all better than that. So I think this could be the moment that finally pushes us towards those kind of immersive technologies as well.
Thank you. Dan, what would you recommend that the top 3 things could be for a tech company willing to expand internationally? If you had a colleague coming to you for advice, say I have a technology company, it could be as well from the United States, but it could apply to any part of the world. And I'm just about to set up international operations. What would you be your top 3 priorities?
Yeah, to a point that was made earlier, first and foremost, businesses exist to create value for their customers. So I think the smartest companies, whether they're technology companies coming out of Silicon Valley or not anywhere else, first listen to market, listen to customers. It's kind of generic. To a point that Zhao made, and maybe Gianpaolo, to your question, what we're seeing right now is phenomenal in terms of the accelerating pace of digital transformation for large enterprises. So literally, it's like we have a crystal ball. I mean, it's like we're seeing 5 years into the future. Great example is in the US here, and whatever it was, an hour and a half ago or so, New York Stock Exchange, which had gone to a completely virtual model, never before has that happened in history, is just starting to reopen. This is an organization that is as stodgy as ever. If ever there was a stodgy organization, it's the New York Stock Exchange. And here, on 4 or 5 days of notice, they shut it down like that. The lights went off and they went fully virtual. That would have taken 5 years of planning. So with respect to, the borderless enterprise, your question about how to expand internationally, now's the time. Never been a better time to experiment. And the technologies that we have that make it, just part of our, kind of the connective tissue of enterprise is now involved. Zoom chats like we're having, and Slack conversations, and digital whiteboarding, and all of these technologies break down the barriers, whether it's language, borders, time zones, all the things that in the past we would have always said, here are the X reasons why we can't expand internationally, because we don't understand the market, because we can't afford travel, because we don't know how to recruit talent. You know what? that changed. We now have the tools in place to be able to think about, where is the best talent? Where are our products? What's the market that our products best serve? What are, for example, demographics? Maybe for a lot of technology companies, what's attractive about emerging markets is digital native populations, infrastructure that's matured much faster than some of the legacy, call it first world economies. So now all of a sudden, companies, United States, elsewhere, can target, whether it's a Latin America, a Thailand, a Vietnam, Indonesia is a fast growing market. All of the traditional ways of thinking about how we go to market and how we find product market fit no longer have to be bounded by a customer's phone number, geography. So just a couple thoughts, but certainly fascinating new canvas that we can paint on as a technology community.
Good insight. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you. And Ira, could you also comment on that and maybe add what do you think is important for startups in the current environment of not only to sustain but to succeed?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts on Joao's notes. Well, definitely it's a new paradigm for all of us right now, and the tech community is changing, and every crisis is a new possibility for new companies and the growth. And perhaps indeed we will have a lower cost for acquisition, but I think the question for current companies and future companies will be the stickiness. If your customers will stay with you, either it's online educational platform or e-sport or live gym classes, etc., we still need to understand the customer needs and what they will need after the COVID-19, because lockdown will be over. And my thoughts are, for example, with conferences and events for people, this is the place when they build connections, and it's always more difficult to build connection via webcast and via platforms like via Zoom. Either you do it face-to-face on the ground, drinking your coffee. So what I would say, for companies, they still need to understand what the customers need. Perhaps you could do customer service, focus groups, interviews, etc., and then develop your products based on this still, because lockdown is just temporary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. And Lilian, what would be your advice for companies after COVID period?
Yeah, so for our practice, we focus on storytelling and story making, and so storytelling that it really can connect with a global audience regardless of their cultural difference, because it create a setting that where people are drawn into, like say now is the backdrop of COVID-19, and even the backdrop of envisioning future, so like the promised land and where we are now. So people are using engage where like you unite idea with the emotion, and emotion like our humanity, we share various type of emotion that we can resonate with. So if you unite your business idea with the emotion, then you can really connect with the audience in a global scale, that regardless of their cultural background.
Thank you, Lilian. And Dan, what would be your advice to our audiences, serial entrepreneurs and investors, in terms of investments and in terms of being sustainable in the current environment?
Yeah, there's the obvious entrepreneur's wisdom: conserve cash now more than ever. There are a lot of investors that are active. As an angel investor, I just invested in a mental health wellness platform for employees at large enterprises. So there are lots of opportunities. I believe it was Kurt, someone had mentioned telehealth opportunities, maybe it was Stan. So lots of opportunities, but in terms of advice for entrepreneurs, we can control one thing. And like I said earlier, we can control value creation. So the language of value creation doesn't change whether we're in a pandemic or not. So if we think about who our customers are, what their pain is, what it is that we can do to make their life better. In the case of at PeopleRain, what we do with AI-driven automation, we're looking at how can we extract an hour of time that's not spent optimally each day and give it back to them in the form of higher productivity. So AI is not, just to what entrepreneurs can do, look for ways to catalyze your productivity to create more value using new technology, and AI is a good example. So if you could give back your entire employee base or every one of your customers back an hour a day, they can all of a sudden be better humans and be better. All of us with kids, we've now become teachers. So they can spend that extra hour a day investing in homeschooling and being more present with families. So that's a universal economic situation formula for value creation. So think about how to make the lives of your customers better first, and avoid distractions. There is money out there for strong companies. It certainly hasn't gone away. Valuations probably have taken a dip, but the strongest companies will always emerge. So I think now, this is somewhat of a cliche, but we look back to 2007, 2008, the last significant decline in economic expansion or economic decline. A lot of the strongest companies were built then, and the same will be the case here, following the same formulas that have always made entrepreneurial ventures successful.
Thank you, Dan. And Anthony, what would be your advice to go and recommendation for our investors and serial entrepreneurs?
I think on the entrepreneurial side, it's along the lines of what Joe had outlined of being able to take advantage of the new audiences that are checking out your product for the first time, or becoming more comfortable with the virtual world, or whatever new technologies it might be that they would have been averse to in the past. So we're going to see a lot of interesting new opportunities pop up with new markets and new market segments of people that are trying, particularly in gaming, trying to figure out what they like best and how it fits into their lives. And maybe it's part of that hour that they get back that Dan mentioned, that can go into entertainment and spending time with friends and family. So I think being able to leverage the new customers that you're getting from this is a big part of it. And on the investment side, I think it's just being able to weed out, like we normally would, people that have the longevity that we think it takes to not only get through kind of this downturn that's happening now and that may be coming, but also to be able to thrive in this environment. I think Dan makes a great point that some of the biggest companies in the last 10, 15 years had come out of the last recession. So those are going to be the bets that we're going to be looking for, is who can not only survive this, but who can thrive because of the decisions that they made during this time.
Thank you, Anthony. And Joe, what would be your recommendation?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Just your advice to go for our audiences, which are serial entrepreneurs and investors. So what investors should focus on during this COVID and post-COVID period, and for startups to succeed and survive?
In terms of investors, there's a lot of people here on the panel more experienced than me. I've been doing it for a year. I would say, think what will be successful when this starts to calm down, and how the world would look like. For the entrepreneurs, it's tough time, but you have to make it through it. So make sure you keep your costs low, make sure you have enough runway to get through the worst, and really be extra careful. It's better to be too careful and then realize later, like, we were a bit too careful. We didn't need to go that far. Than not to be careful enough and run out of money or not being able to raise. I think when you're a founder, when you're an entrepreneur, if you're raising, do your work on the investors you're talking to. If you're talking to angel investors, they're less likely to be investing now than they were before. If you're talking to funds, it depends a lot on the life cycle of the fund. So we raised our fund 1 year ago. We really are actively investing. Nothing has changed. You know, we have commitments to our LPs. We have strong institutional investors. We need to deploy the money. But if you are, you know, if the last fund was raised 4 or 5 years ago, you might be near the end of the investment cycle, and it might be harder for you to raise. So just make sure you're spending your time talking to people that can actually back you right now, and be a bit more careful than usual there, because time and money is of the essence for entrepreneurs right now.
Thank you. And Stan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I wish I was a bit more in Zhao's seat right now. We put together a SPIV for each deal. So we pull together investors on a transactional basis, unlike a conventional VC. And so, you know, we hear back from, I work with a lot of family funds, for instance, and it really depends on what their mindset is like. Those that understand tech investing, that come from an entrepreneur's mindset, are still very open, because they look back at the opportunities that were created, you know, 8-9 years ago during the last crisis, and say, you know, there's some low-hanging fruit here, right? Let's take advantage of this opportunity. The other segments of the market, not so much. A lot of people are holding back and being much more conservative, and I would expect that to last probably for the next year. I think that I'm excited by what's happening. There's, you know, innovation gets forced on us sometimes. The status quo gets upended from time to time, and now it's a time when that's happening. And there's a reason why people in their 20s make such good entrepreneurs. It's not just that they have nothing to lose. It's because they don't have the old habits. They are great at hacking things because they want to do things the most efficient way their creative minds say to do it. And they don't really think of corporate norms and the status quo the same way. And I think we're going to see some great stuff coming out of this. I don't know exactly where it's at. You know, we're really interested in the telehealth market right now, and some things coming out of there because we think there's some innovation and an upending of the status quo coming out of that market. But I think it's going to happen across the board. And so now is actually a hard time to solicit that angel investment, but it's also a really good time to make it. So I think we'll be seeing some really great startups coming out of this for those who have the guts to go for it.
Thank you, Stan. And Anthony, would you like to add something?
No, I think I pretty much summed up how I felt on the entrepreneur side, and for investors as well. I think it's a very interesting time to be on either side of the coin right now, and you know, forced innovation is always going to yield unique results. So we'll see what happens over the next few years.
Thank you. And Kurt?
Yeah, I think I'll just add one or two quick things. I've been through two economic downturns now. I guess this would be my third, and like everybody else said, forced innovation is an amazing force in this world. One thing that I would encourage entrepreneurs to do is talk to everybody. If you are just starting something right now, then you're in that headspace where you can have conversations with people you think might agree with you, people who you don't know if they'll agree with you or not. They will really help you refine your idea and your thoughts at this moment. It's particularly important to over communicate at this point, because nobody really knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen a month from now or a year from now when it comes to this pandemic. So you may end up getting some interesting ideas from people who you never expected. And on the investor side, you know, I've been speaking to a lot of my friends in the venture world, and my advice is almost the same. The conversations they're having are leading down some very interesting paths at this moment. So I would emphasize over communication at this point.
Okay, and Gianpaolo?
Yes, we have to remember cash is king. So, of course, we have to keep an eye on the dashboard. And it's important, especially for young companies. But of course, I mean, plenty of optimism and plenty of opportunities around. So good luck, everyone.
Ira, would you like to add something?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think everything was said already. And as I mentioned before, I think we all need to focus on customer and their needs, first of all. And if this is done on the product side, then there will be definitely the product growth.
Thank you so much, everybody. So we finalized our Startup Leaders Club for today, and I welcome everybody to join our other events, including international roadshows with pitch competitions for startups, and serial entrepreneurs can also do masterclasses and keynotes, as well as our investors who could join investor panels and judge pitch competitions. So welcome to different formats, and we inspire you also to brainstorm with us on the new formats of interaction as well. Thank you, stay healthy, and the best wishes for the week. Bye-bye.